Two 5-year-old boys, blood trickling from fresh cuts on their arms, pressed their faces against the cold diner window like ghosts begging to be seen. They had just escaped hell, running barefoot through Atlanta's freezing rain after their foster father's belt had finally gone too far. For 3 days, they'd been invisible to a world that had already forgotten them, eating rotting food from dumpsters and hiding from police who would only drag them back to the nightmare they'd fled. Inside that diner, Sonia Malvin was counting her last $27, all that stood between her and eviction. Her own 8-year-old daughter needed school clothes, the electricity bill was overdue, and her boss had just threatened to fire her if she missed one more shift. She was drowning in her own desperation, barely keeping her head above water as a single black mother in a system designed to break women like her. But when Sonia saw those two broken little boys, their lips blue from cold, their eyes hollow with the kind of pain that steals childhood, everything inside her shattered. Her boss screamed at her, "Don't you dare open that door. We'll lose our license." Her rational mind screamed louder, "You can't afford to lose this job. Your own child will suffer." But Sonia's heart screamed loudest of all. She unlocked that door knowing it might cost her everything. She sat those boys down and gave them her own lunch, the chicken and waffle she'd been saving because she couldn't afford dinner. As tears carved clean lines down their dirt-stained faces, the smaller twin whispered words that would echo through eternity. "Please don't let us disappear. Everyone else pretends we don't exist." In that moment, 3 lives changed forever. But what Sonia didn't know was that her choice to save 2 dying children would nearly destroy her, and 15 years later, would transform her into something she never saw coming. Before we reveal how this single act of defiance created a miracle that will leave you speechless, if you believe that love is worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happens next will prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is choose kindness when the world demands cruelty. To understand how Sonia Malvin became the kind of woman who would risk everything for 2 starving children, you need to know her story. At 50 years old, Sonia was already carrying more weight on her shoulders than most people could handle in a lifetime. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., while Atlanta was still sleeping, Sonia's alarm would pierce through the darkness of her tiny 2-bedroom apartment. She was a single mother raising her 8-year-old daughter Jasmine completely alone after losing her husband Adrian in a horrific construction accident 2 years earlier. The lawsuit settlement barely covered the funeral costs, leaving Sonia to navigate widowhood, motherhood, and poverty all at once. Her lifeline was Mel's Diner in downtown Atlanta, where she worked double shifts 6 days a week, from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then back from 6 p.m. to midnight. That's 11 hours a day on her feet, serving coffee to construction workers, comfort food to office employees, and late-night meals to anyone who needed a warm place to sit. Her feet ached constantly, her back screamed in pain, but Sonia never let it show. She greeted every customer with a genuine smile and treated everyone like family. But even working nearly 70 hours a week, Sonia was living paycheck to paycheck. After rent, utilities, groceries, and Jasmine's school supplies, there was maybe $20 left for anything unexpected. She was 1 car repair away from disaster, 1 sick day away from missing rent. Yet somehow, Sonia never became bitter. Her heart remained as big as her struggles were real. That's the woman who was wiping down tables at 6 a.m. on that rainy October morning when she first saw them. Tommy and Danny John, 2 5-year-old twins, with faces pressed against the diner's rain-streaked window. They looked like small ghosts in the gray morning light, soaked through their torn clothes, shivering uncontrollably. What Sonia didn't know was that these boys had been surviving on the streets for 3 weeks after escaping from their 4th foster home. A place where the foster father's idea of discipline involved leather belts and locked closets. Tommy and Danny had run away in the middle of the night, preferring the dangers of the street to the guaranteed violence of that house. For 21 days, they'd been eating from garbage cans behind restaurants, drinking rainwater from puddles, and sleeping in doorways. They'd learned to move like shadows, staying invisible, to avoid being sent back to the system that had failed them over and over again. But hunger is a powerful force, and the smell of bacon and fresh biscuits from Mel's diner had drawn them like a magnet. When Sonia saw those tiny faces at her window, something inside her chest cracked wide open. She didn't think about the diner's strict policy against homeless people. She didn't consider her manager Bob's threats about maintaining the establishment's reputation. She didn't even think about the fact that she could lose the job that kept her and Jasmine fed. All she saw were two babies who needed help. Against every rule, Sonia unlocked that back door and quietly ushered the boys inside. "I can't just let babies starve in the rain," she whispered to herself, words that would echo through the next 15 years. The twins huddled in a corner booth like frightened animals. Their eyes darted toward the exit, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. They'd learned not to trust adults. Every grown-up in their short lives had either hurt them or abandoned them. But Sonia moved slowly, gently. She brought them her own lunch, chicken and waffles that she'd been saving for her break. As she placed the plate in front of them, their eyes widened in disbelief. Real food. Hot food. Food that was meant for them. Danny, the smaller twin, had trouble forming words clearly. Trauma had affected his speech, making him stutter and stumble over syllables. Tommy, barely older by 12 minutes, had appointed himself his brother's fierce protector. He tested every bite first, watched every move Sonia made, ready to shield Danny from any threat. But as they ate, and it was the most desperate, grateful eating Sonia had ever witnessed, something magical began to happen. The walls these boys had built around their hearts started to crack, just a little. Over the next few days, a secret routine developed. Sonia would leave the diner's back door unlocked during her early morning shift. Tommy and Danny would slip inside like shadows, and Sonia would feed them breakfast before the morning rush began. She taught them to help with simple tasks, wiping tables, organizing napkins, folding silverware in paper, giving them purpose and dignity along with meals. Manager Bob was not happy. A stocky man in his 50s who viewed the diner as his kingdom, Bob constantly threatened to call social services. "Sonia, those kids are bad for business. What if health inspectors see them? What if customers complain? This has to stop." But Sonia stood her ground with quiet determination. "These boys need someone to believe in them. If you want to fire me for feeding hungry children, then that's what you'll have to do." At home, however, Sonia faced a different challenge. 8-year-old Jasmine had always been the center of her mother's world. But now Sonia was coming home exhausted from not just work, but from the emotional investment she was making in two strange boys. Jasmine felt the shift keenly. "Why do you care more about them than me?" Jasmine asked one evening, tears streaming down her face. "They're not even your real kids." That conversation broke Sonia's heart because she understood her daughter's pain. Sonia sat Jasmine down and explained something that would shape both their lives. "Baby girl, when you have love in your heart, it doesn't get smaller when you share it with more people. It gets bigger. Those boys don't take away from my love for you. They help me love you even more because they show me how precious children are." Through broken conversations and gentle coaxing, the twins' heartbreaking story emerged. Their parents had died in a car accident when the boys were just 3 years old. For 2 years, they'd been bounced between 4 different foster homes. The first family returned them after a month, claiming they were too much work. The second home had 3 other foster children and treated them like unpaid servants. The third placement lasted 6 months before the foster mother decided to move out of state. But the fourth home, that's where the real damage happened. The foster father had a drinking problem and a violent temper. Danny's speech impediment? It developed after being screamed at and struck for talking too much. Tommy's angry outbursts? They came from watching his brother suffer and being powerless to stop it. These boys had learned that love was temporary, that adults were dangerous, and that they could only count on each other. But Sonia was teaching them something different. Day by day, meal by meal, gentle word by gentle word, she was showing them that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. The problem was, Sonia's finances were being stretched to the breaking point. Feeding 3 extra mouths on a waitress's salary was mathematically impossible. She started skipping her own meals, giving her lunch money to buy extra groceries. She fell behind on rent, first by a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. The electricity company sent a disconnection notice. Her ancient Honda started making ominous noises that she couldn't afford to have diagnosed. And her health? The stress of working double shifts while carrying the emotional weight of 3 children began taking its toll. Sonia lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles under her eyes became permanent fixtures. Her hands shook from exhaustion and anxiety. But every morning when she saw Tommy and Danny slip through that back door, when she watched them eat like every meal might be their last, when Danny's stuttering speech grew a little clearer and Tommy's defensive walls dropped just a little lower, Sonia knew she couldn't stop. These boys had become more than just hungry children she fed. They had become her purpose, her mission, her calling. What Sonia didn't know was that her kindness was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The system that had failed Tommy and Danny was about to come for them again. And this time, Sonia would have to decide just how much she was willing to sacrifice for 2 little boys who weren't even legally hers. The crisis that would change all their lives forever was just around the corner. For 6 beautiful months, Sonia had managed to keep Tommy and Danny safe in her secret world at Mel's Diner. But the system that had already failed these boys 4 times wasn't done with them yet. It happened on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Sonia was teaching Danny how to count money from the tip jar, while Tommy organized the sugar packets with mathematical precision. The boys had grown so much in those months. Danny's stutter had almost disappeared, and Tommy had started smiling again, really smiling, not just the protective mask he used to wear. Then the door chimed, and Sonia's blood turned to ice. 2 social workers in crisp suits walked into the diner, followed by a police officer. The lead worker, a stern woman with a clipboard, scanned the room until her eyes landed on the twins. "Thomas and Daniel John, we're here to take you back into protective custody." Danny, this little 5-year-old who had just learned to trust again, threw his tiny arms around Sonia's legs and screamed words that would echo in her nightmares. "Please don't let them take us. Please, Miss Sonia. We'll be good. We promise we'll be good." Tommy, trying so hard to be brave for his brother, looked up at Sonia with eyes full of betrayal and terror. "You said we were safe here. You promised no one would hurt us anymore." Sonia fell to her knees, wrapping both boys in her arms, her voice breaking as she tried to reassure them. "I'm going to find you, babies. I promise you, I'm going to bring you home. This isn't goodbye." But the law is cold and unforgiving. Despite her protests, despite her tears, despite the fact that these children were thriving under her care, Sonia had no legal rights. She wasn't their foster parent. She wasn't their guardian. In the eyes of the system, she was just a waitress who had been harboring runaway children. As the social workers pried the boys away from her, loading them into a white van with tinted windows, Sonia collapsed onto the diner floor, sobbing in a way that made grown men turn away. The last thing she heard was Danny screaming her name from inside that van as it drove away, taking her heart with it. The weeks that followed were the darkest of Sonia's life. She showed up to work, but she was a ghost of herself. She'd set 2 extra plates out of habit, then remember they weren't coming. She'd save the best biscuits from each batch, forgetting there was no one to give them to. Regular customers noticed the change immediately. Sonia's famous smile had died the day those boys were taken. At home, 8-year-old Jasmine watched her mother fade away. This child, who had once been jealous of the attention Sonia gave the twins, now desperately missed the version of her mother who had cared so deeply about something. "Maybe we can find them, Mama," Jasmine would whisper, bringing Sonia cold washcloths when the crying headaches became too much to bear. But Sonia felt like she had failed the 2 little souls who had needed her most. She had promised them safety and couldn't deliver. She had sworn they'd never be hurt again. And then watched helplessly as they were dragged back into the system that had already broken them 4 times over. For 3 weeks, Sonia spiraled deeper into despair. She barely ate, barely slept, barely functioned. But then something inside her shifted. Call it maternal instinct, call it divine intervention, call it the stubborn love of a woman who refuses to give up on children who need her. Sitting in her empty apartment one night, staring at the twins, drawings still taped to her refrigerator, Sonia made a decision that would change everything. She opened her Bible to a verse that had sustained her through losing her husband. Faith without works is dead. Those boys were coming home to her, no matter what it took. The next morning, Sonia walked into the office of Patricia Williams, a family law attorney she couldn't afford. She emptied her purse on the desk. $847 in crumpled bills and loose change, every penny she had managed to save over 6 months. "I need to become a foster parent," she said with quiet determination. "Those boys are coming home to me." Mrs. Williams, a woman who had seen every heartbreaking family situation imaginable, was moved by Sonia's fierce love. She agreed to take the case for whatever Sonia could pay, understanding that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought for money, but for love. What Sonia didn't know was that becoming a certified foster parent would be like running a marathon while carrying a 100-pound weight. The state required mountains of paperwork, background checks that went back decades, home inspections that scrutinized everything from the water pressure to the neighborhood crime statistics. Sonia's biggest obstacle? Her income. The state wanted to see financial stability, and a waitress working double shifts barely qualified. But Sonia wasn't about to let bureaucracy stand between her and those boys. She took a second job cleaning offices from midnight to 4 a.m., giving her exactly 30 minutes to get home, shower, and report to the diner for her morning shift. 7 days a week, Sonia worked nearly 20 hours a day, surviving on pure determination and the memory of 2 little boys who were counting on her. Months dragged by with endless interviews, psychological evaluations, and home visits from social workers who questioned every aspect of Sonia's life. Could a single mother really handle 3 children? Was her apartment big enough? Was her income stable enough? Was she emotionally prepared for the challenges of traumatized foster children? Just when Sonia thought she might break from exhaustion and bureaucratic frustration, something beautiful happened. The community that had watched her love those boys began to rally around her. Regular customers at Mel's Diner started leaving bigger tips with notes that said, "For the boys' room." Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who came in for coffee every Tuesday, organized a fundraiser at her church. Even manager Bob, who had initially opposed Sonia's mission, began putting extra money in an envelope marked Sonia's Fund. If you're feeling inspired by how this community came together to help Sonia fight for those boys, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will prove that love really can conquer any system. The donations weren't huge, $5 here, $20 there. But they added up to something much more valuable than money. They represented a community's belief that Sonia was doing something right, something important, something worth fighting for. After 8 months of paperwork, interviews, home inspections, and financial reviews, Sonia finally received the call that would change 3 lives forever. She had been approved as a certified foster parent, and Tommy and Danny could come home. But here's what will break your heart. When Sonia was finally allowed to see the boys again, they had changed. 8 months in the system had damaged them in ways that 6 months of her love was only beginning to heal. Danny's stutter had returned worse than ever. Tommy had developed angry outbursts that reminded Sonia of a caged animal. The reunion at the social services office was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The boys ran to Sonia like their lives depended on it, but they also flinched when she reached to hug them, trauma responses from whatever they had endured during those 8 months apart. What do you think happened to Tommy and Danny during those 8 months away from Sonia's care? Share your thoughts in the comments, because their journey through the system during that time will explain so much about why her love meant everything to them. But as Sonia held those boys again, feeling their small bodies shake with relief and residual fear, she made a promise that nothing and no one would ever separate them again. They were going home. Really home. And she was going to spend every remaining day of her life proving to them that they were safe, loved, and wanted. The real transformation of all their lives was about to begin. Danny clutched a shoebox to his chest, and when Sonia asked what was inside, he opened it with trembling hands. Every single letter she had written to them during those 8 months of separation was there, worn soft from being read over and over again. Tommy had taught himself to read better just so he could help his brother understand every word of love Sonia had sent. "We knew you'd come back for us," Tommy whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We never stopped believing." The group home had been overcrowded and understaffed, but it had given the boys something unexpected: structure and education. Danny's speech had actually improved through regular therapy sessions, and Tommy had discovered something remarkable about himself. When frustrated or angry, instead of lashing out, he had learned to lose himself in numbers and patterns. The boy who once couldn't sit still had become fascinated with mathematics, solving problems that impressed even the social workers. Moving in with Sonia and Jasmine wasn't just about adding 2 more beds to their tiny apartment. It was about creating something none of them had ever experienced before. A real family. Jasmine, now 9 years old, had spent 8 months watching her mother grieve for these boys. Any jealousy she'd once felt had transformed into protective love. She appointed herself their big sister and took the role seriously. But Sonia quickly realized that giving these boys love wasn't enough. She needed to give them hope for a future beyond the poverty that had defined all their lives. It started with small observations. Tommy would organize everything in perfect mathematical patterns: his clothes, his toys, even his food on the plate. When Sonia helped him with homework, he would solve math problems 3 grade levels above his age, then ask for more challenging ones. His mind was like a calculator, but more than that, he found peace in the logical world of numbers, where everything had a clear, correct answer. Danny, meanwhile, was always drawing. On napkins at the diner, in the margins of his school papers, on every scrap of paper he could find. His pictures weren't just childish scribbles. They showed real artistic talent, an eye for detail and beauty that took Sonia's breath away. He would draw the 3 of them as superheroes, or imagine elaborate inventions that could help people, or create fantastical worlds where families stayed together forever. That's when Sonia made a decision that would change the trajectory of all their lives. Instead of spending her tip money on small luxuries or putting it toward bills, she started investing it in her children's dreams. She bought Tommy mathematics workbooks from the high school level, even though he was only in 2nd grade. She purchased Danny art supplies, real ones, not just crayons, and watched his face light up like Christmas morning when he held his first set of professional colored pencils. In their cramped apartment, Sonia created something magical. She pushed her own bed against the wall and used the freed space to set up a study area with a folding table from Goodwill and 3 mismatched chairs. It wasn't much, but it became their sanctuary of learning. Every evening after her double shifts, exhausted beyond measure, Sonia would sit with her children and help them dream bigger than their circumstances. "Education is your way out of poverty, boys," she would tell them, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Dream bigger than this place. Dream bigger than anything you can see from here." But dreams come with a price, and Sonia paid it with her body, her health, and every ounce of energy she possessed. Supporting a family of 4 on a waitress's salary meant Sonia worked herself beyond human limits. Her double shifts at the diner became triple shifts when the opportunity arose. She cleaned those offices until 4 a.m., served breakfast until 2 p.m., then returned for the evening shift until midnight. 7 days a week, Sonia operated on maybe 4 hours of sleep fueled by coffee and pure maternal determination. The boys began to excel in ways that amazed their teachers. Tommy tested into the gifted program and started participating in math competitions, often beating students 4 or 5 years older. Danny's artwork was displayed in the school hallway, and his teachers began talking about art scholarships and specialized programs. But success at school made them more aware of what Sonia was sacrificing for them. They saw her hands shake from exhaustion. They noticed when she gave them her dinner, claiming she wasn't hungry. They watched her count and recount their grocery money, witnessed her choosing between paying the electric bill and buying Tommy's advanced math textbooks. By the time the twins were 14, they had both earned partial scholarships to Westfield Academy, an elite preparatory school across town. It should have been a celebration, but instead, it meant more expenses. Uniforms, transportation, additional supplies that their scholarships didn't cover. Sonia took on a third job, babysitting for a wealthy family on weekends. She was now working 7 days a week, nearly 20 hours a day, and her body was beginning to break down. Her back ached constantly from years of waitressing. Her feet were swollen and painful. She developed a persistent cough that she ignored, claiming it was just from the diner's smoky air. The boys begged her to slow down. "We don't need the fancy school," Tommy would insist. "We can succeed anywhere." But Sonia wouldn't hear it. She had seen what proper education could do, and she wasn't going to let financial limitations steal her children's futures. What the boys didn't know was that Sonia had started collapsing at work. Small fainting spells that she hid from everyone, dizzy moments when exhaustion overwhelmed her system. Her manager Bob began forcing her to take breaks, worried about the woman who had become like family to him. But Sonia's sacrifices were producing miracles. Tommy and Danny weren't just surviving at the elite prep school. They were dominating it. Tommy became the youngest student ever to take advanced placement calculus as a sophomore. Danny's art portfolio was so impressive that college recruiters began visiting the school specifically to see his work. Their senior year brought news that seemed impossible for two boys who had once eaten from garbage cans. Tommy graduated as valedictorian with a perfect 4.0 GPA and a 1580 SAT score. Danny graduated as salutatorian just behind his brother, with an art portfolio that had earned him recognition in 3 national competitions. But the real miracle came in the form of 2 acceptance letters that arrived on the same spring day. Both boys had been accepted to MIT, Tommy for engineering, Danny for industrial design, with full scholarships that covered not just tuition, but room, board, and living expenses. The day they graduated from high school, Sonia sat in the front row of the auditorium, wearing her best dress, the same one she'd worn to her husband's funeral years earlier. When Tommy's name was called as valedictorian, and he gave his speech about the woman who believed in us when we couldn't believe in ourselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Danny's speech as valedictorian was even more emotional. He dedicated his achievement to Miss Sonia, who taught us that love isn't just words. It's sacrifice, it's action, and it's never giving up on someone, even when they can't see their own worth. But graduation day was also goodbye day. And that reality hit all of them like a physical blow. As Sonia helped the boys pack for MIT, the apartment felt bigger and emptier with each box they filled. These young men, because at 18, they were no longer the scared little boys who had once pressed their faces against her diner window, were about to step into a world of possibilities that their beginnings had never promised. The night before they left for Boston, Tommy and Danny sat Sonia down for a conversation that would echo through the next 15 years. "We're going to make you proud," Tommy promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything you sacrificed for us, every hour you worked, every dream you gave up so we could have ours, we're going to make it all worth it." Danny, now a confident young artist, took Sonia's worn hands in his. "We're going to take care of you someday, Miss Sonia. Just like you took care of us. We promise." Sonia smiled through her tears, but inside she was terrified. For 13 years, these boys had been her purpose, her reason for getting up every morning, her motivation for pushing through exhaustion and pain. Who was she without them? What would fill the enormous space they were leaving behind? As their taxi pulled away from the curb, heading to the airport that would take them to their bright futures, Sonia stood on her front steps and waved until the car disappeared around the corner. She was incredibly proud and utterly heartbroken, all at the same time. What Sonia didn't know was that those 2 young men she had raised were about to embark on a journey that would change not just their lives, but hers as well. The seeds she had planted with love, watered with sacrifice, and nurtured with unwavering faith were about to bloom in ways she could never have imagined. 5 years later, Tommy and Danny John had kept their promise in ways that would take your breath away. At MIT, they didn't just excel, they revolutionized everything they touched. Tommy's mathematical genius combined with Danny's artistic vision created something the tech world had never seen before. While their classmates were still figuring out their majors, the John twins were developing software that would change how people interact with technology. Their startup, launched from their dorm room junior year, created an app that used artificial intelligence to help foster children connect with potential families. It wasn't just business for them, it was personal. Every line of code they wrote, every design element Danny crafted was infused with the memory of being unwanted, unloved, and forgotten by the system. By the time they graduated, their company had attracted the attention of Silicon Valley giants. When they took their company public at age 20, the youngest entrepreneurs ever to ring the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange, they became multimillionaires overnight. But here's what will restore your faith in humanity. Through the years of success, scholarships, achievements, and wealth accumulation, Tommy and Danny never forgot the woman who had risked everything for them. Every milestone they reached, every door that opened, every opportunity that presented itself, they credited to the foundation Sonia had given them when they had nothing. And now, on this crisp October morning in Atlanta, they decided to come home to repay their debt to Sonia, who they had not seen in 5 years. Sonia was at home, struggling to zip up her old waitress uniform that had grown tight around her 63-year-old frame, when the rumble of expensive engines broke the usual quiet of her neighborhood. She peeked through her worn curtains and felt her heart skip a beat. 2 gleaming luxury cars, a black Tesla and a silver BMW, were pulling up outside her modest home like something from a movie. Her first instinct was fear. In her neighborhood, expensive cars usually meant trouble. Drug dealers, loan sharks, or worse. Her hands trembled as she watched 2 tall, impeccably dressed young men step out of the vehicles. They wore suits that probably cost more than she made in 3 months, their confidence radiating success and power. "Lord, please don't let this be about Jasmine," she whispered, her mind racing through every possible crisis. Had her daughter gotten into some kind of trouble? Were these men from the bank about her overdue mortgage payments? As the young men approached her front door, Sonia's breath caught in her throat. Something about the way they walked, the way they carried themselves, tugged at a memory she couldn't quite place. But 15 years and success had transformed them so completely that recognition danced just beyond her reach. The knock came soft but confident. Sonia's arthritic hands shook as she unlocked the 3 deadbolts she'd installed after a break-in 2 years ago. She opened the door just a crack, the security chain still attached, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it. "Ma'am, are you Sonia Malvin?" the taller one asked, his voice gentle but unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" Sonia replied, her voice barely above a whisper, every instinct telling her to keep that chain locked. These young men looked like they belonged in boardrooms, not on her front porch. The shorter one stepped forward, and something in his eyes made Sonia's breath catch. "Miss Sonia, it's us. It's Tommy and Danny." For a moment, time stopped. Sonia stared at these 2 successful, confident young men, trying to reconcile them with the memory of 2 terrified 5-year-olds who used to hide behind her apron. Her mind rejected what her heart was beginning to recognize. That's not possible," she stammered, her legs suddenly feeling weak. "Tommy and Danny were just little boys. You're grown men. Her voice broke as the impossible truth began to sink in. Danny smiled, and suddenly she could see it. That same gentle expression he'd worn when he was 5 years old, drawing pictures of their family on diner napkins. "Miss Sonia, I know we look different. It's been 15 years, but it's really us." Sonia's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face as recognition crashed over her like a tidal wave. These weren't strangers. These weren't dangerous men. These were her boys, her babies, grown into the successful men she had always dreamed they could become. "Oh my God," she sobbed, fumbling with the security chain. "Oh my God, is it really you? Tommy, Danny, my babies?" The moment she opened that door fully, both young men stepped forward, and she could see them clearly now. Tommy's mathematical precision in the way he stood, Danny's artistic eye in how he noticed every detail of her emotional state. They were taller than she remembered possible, broader, stronger, but their eyes were the same. "We came home, Miss Sonia," Tommy said, his own voice thick with emotion. "We promised we'd take care of you someday, remember?" Sonia collapsed against the doorframe, overwhelmed by the shock of seeing them, the fear that had gripped her moments before, and the overwhelming joy of realizing her boys had not only survived but thrived beyond her wildest dreams. I thought something terrible was happening," she whispered, touching their faces with shaking hands, still not quite believing they were real. "I was so scared. You look so successful, so important. I didn't recognize my own boys." "We're still your boys," Danny assured her, gently taking her arm to steady her. "We've just grown up a little." But the luxury car was just the opening act of a surprise that would change Sonia's life forever. "Miss Sonia," Danny said, his voice now clear and confident, free from any trace of the stutter that had once marked his trauma, "this car is beautiful, but it's not even close to what we really want to give you." From the Tesla's trunk, Tommy pulled out a manila envelope that contained documents that would make Sonia's knees buckle. The deed to a 4-bedroom house in one of Atlanta's most beautiful neighborhoods, paid in full. No mortgage, no monthly payments, no financial stress ever again. But they weren't finished. Danny handed her a college fund statement showing $150,000 set aside for Jasmine, who is now 23 and pursuing her master's degree in education. "Your daughter spent her childhood watching you sacrifice for us," Danny explained. "She deserves to chase her dreams without worrying about student loans." And then came the revelation that would make Sonia understand the true magnitude of what her kindness had created. Tommy pulled out incorporation papers for something called the Sonia Malvin Foundation, a nonprofit organization with an initial funding of $2 million dedicated to helping foster children find permanent, loving homes. "You gave us a future when we had nothing," Tommy said, tears streaming down his face. "Now we give back, not just to you, but to every child who needs what you gave us, someone who believes in them." The foundation had already helped over 1,000 foster children find homes. Social workers across the country were using the twins' technology to match children with families more effectively. Group homes were being renovated and expanded. Foster families were receiving support and resources they desperately needed. All of it, named after a waitress who had once fed 2 hungry boys her own lunch. Sonia collapsed onto her front steps, overwhelmed by the realization that the boys she had saved had spent 15 years figuring out how to save her in return. Every sacrifice she had made, every double shift she had worked, every moment of exhaustion and worry, it had all led to this moment when love came full circle. "I was so afraid when I saw you," she sobbed, the fear and shock finally giving way to pure amazement. "I thought you were strangers coming to hurt me. I never dreamed you'd become such an incredible man." But the surprises weren't over yet. A caravan of cars began pulling up to Sonia's house. Out stepped people she hadn't seen in years, former customers from Mel's Diner, neighbors she had helped during tough times, teachers who remembered how she had advocated for the twins, even manager Bob, now retired, carrying a cake that read, "Thank you for showing us what love looks like." The community that had once rallied to help Sonia become a foster parent had come together again to celebrate the miracle her love had created. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s, shuffled forward with tears in her eyes. "We always knew those boys were special," she said, "but we never knew they'd grow up to be guardian angels." As the impromptu block party continued around her, with neighbors sharing stories of Sonia's kindness over the years, she found herself sitting quietly with Tommy and Danny, just like those early mornings at the diner when it was just the 3 of them against the world. "I just fed 2 hungry babies," Sonia whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I never imagined. I just couldn't let you starve. And I was so scared when I first saw you today. You've become such powerful, successful men." "And we fed your soul for a lifetime," Danny replied, taking her hand. "That's what family does, Miss Sonia. We take care of each other. We're sorry we scared you. We should have called first, but we wanted to surprise you." "The best surprise of my life," Sonia whispered, still touching their faces to make sure they were real. 6 months later, on a rainy Tuesday morning that reminded her of that first day she saw the twins, Sonia was behind the wheel of her Tesla, delivering hot meals to homeless children gathered under a highway overpass. In her trunk were warm blankets, clean clothes, and information about the Sonia Malvin Foundation's emergency shelter program. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, with tangled hair and scared eyes, reminded Sonia so much of those long-ago mornings with Tommy and Danny. As Sonia handed her a warm meal and a gentle smile, she whispered the same words that had started this incredible journey. "I can't just let babies go hungry." The circle of kindness that had begun with a $3 meal, shared between a struggling waitress and 2 orphaned boys, had grown into a movement that would touch thousands of lives. The Sonia Malvin Foundation continued to expand, opening new facilities, creating innovative programs, and proving that love multiplied becomes an unstoppable force for good. Tommy and Danny, now successful beyond their wildest childhood dreams, never forgot the lessons Sonia had taught them in that tiny apartment study space. Dream bigger than your circumstances, but never bigger than your compassion. And Sonia? She had learned something beautiful too. Sometimes when you think you're saving someone else, you're actually saving yourself. Those 2 hungry little boys hadn't just received her love, they had given her purpose, meaning, and a legacy that would ripple through generations. The foundation that bears her name has now helped over 10,000 foster children find loving homes, proving that one woman's decision to feed 2 hungry children could literally change the world. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.